to both of them for supporting this important work. So for those of you who want to tweet, it's hashtag EI13, excuse me, E13. There you go. Okay. EI13, there we go, okay. Great and fun tool that, can you go back one? That we have, we're launching today, which is the Energy Innovation Budget. And what that is a pretty fun little tool, and it allows you to go online and allocate what you think the budget for clean energy innovation should be in the country. And it's broken down by R&D, demonstration, manufacturing, procurement, and deployment. So you allocate money, then you go to the next step in terms of what it shows you what we're actually spending as a country on each of those. And then you can then, again, put in what you think the optimal should be. And we're going to list various experts on there in the next week or so who have their own recommendations for what that should be. So again, that's going to be at energyinnovation.us/build. Okay, so the real question, I think, for today is what's holding us back? Why have we made so little progress in clean energy? Global climate emissions are not going down. We're not making serious progress, at least on the policy front. There are lots and lots of things that we still need to do. The real question is why? And the conventional view from most advocates who are in this debate, the conventional view is essentially that it's interests that are holding us back. It's interest of corporations and others who simply do not want to have action. And I think that really misses what's going on. Certainly interests are a part of it, but as John Stuart Mill once said, give me one man with a belief over 99 with interests any time. So I think really the fundamental problem is not so much interest, but it's the belief that we've really had the wrong belief. We've had the wrong mental model or the wrong policy framework. And I think getting that right is the most important thing the clean energy and climate change movement needs to do. So let me start with that. As I said, I think part of this is we have the wrong logic chain. And to get to the end result, which is essentially a global economy that is emitting zero or close to zero greenhouse gases, we've got to go through a logic chain. And what that logic chain needs to be, it needs to start with just this first one, which is global warming is real. Next, that global warming is man-made. And next, that global warming is a problem. Now, I would imagine, is there anybody in this room who does not believe in all three of those? All right, good. We're good to go then. I think that's is the Heartland Institute conference? No. So clearly, those three are things that I think pretty much reasonable people should agree on. Obviously, not everybody's reasonable in the world. But after that, it gets a little more difficult. First of all, the next one has to be global warming. It's not American warming. Now, that seems obvious, yet many of the solutions that have been proposed really fundamentally are American warming solutions. The Washington Post had an op-ed, has an editorial yesterday that said America should act even if no other country acts. The reality is we could eliminate the United States. We could just say, just imagine a thought experiment, zero carbon and greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. It still won't make any difference. There will still be significant greenhouse gas growth over the next 50 years. So it has to be, any solution we have has to be a global solution. Well, okay, a global solution to do what? Well, it has to be a global solution to get greenhouse gases pretty much close to zero. As Armand Cohen will probably, I think will say a little later, the nature of the problem, the nature of the atmosphere is that unless you get close to zero, the problem is not going to get solved. How do we get close to zero? Okay. Next slide, please. Well, the only way to do that is with what we call greenhouse gas efficiency. In other words, if you think about the GHG, and it's an equation which is largely related to the amount of people on the planet, the amount of economic activity they engage in, and the efficiency of that activity, the greenhouse gas efficiency of that activity. We're not going to get that number on the left low by population control. Population's going to keep going up no matter what we do. And we're not going to get it through GDP, per capita GDP control. As much as some people argue that the way to solve this problem is to keep the Indians in dire poverty, or for us to go into poverty, the only way to get there is with GHG efficiency, and that means much, much better ways of producing what we do in the economy with fewer greenhouse gases. Okay, next one. So the only way to get there has to be, if we want to get to zero, we've got to adopt zero greenhouse gas energy sources. And as much as people talk about efficiency as the answer, efficiency simply can't get us there. And there's a new report we'll be releasing shortly that makes it pretty clear that efficiency can help. But again, efficiency is sort of like getting rid of the United States. It reduces the growth of greenhouse gases. It doesn't solve it. Okay, next one. So how do we get to zero? And this to me is really the critical sticking point in the debate, this one. Is the only way to get to zero on a globalized basis is for clean energy to be better and cheaper than dirty energy. And the idea that we can get there through guilt, through mandates, through prices, I think simply doesn't scale globally. We're never going to get countries like India and China to consume and pay us large price premium for clean energy. They will do it when it makes economic sense for them to do it, as we will, frankly. So then the question is, how do we get Siiii cheaper than fossil fuels? And again, this to me is goes to the kind of the major intellectual conflict or disagreement in the movement today, is how do you get there? And again, I think if you look at the evidence, what we'll hear today is that clean energy today simply is not cost and performance competitive with existing dirty technologies, dirty fuels. And it's not going to be through scale up. You could scale it all up as high as you want, and you still won't get the cost curves down, fully loaded cost curves down below the cost of dirty energy. So that fundamentally means we're going to need better technology. We're going to need batteries that are 4 or 5 times better. We're going to need solar conversion rates that are 2 or 3 times better, and the like. And the only way to do that is through a national and, frankly, global innovation policy. So that's, to us, the frame. That's why we focus so much on an innovation policy. Not because we don't think the problem is serious, not because we don't think we have to act now, but that the only way to get to this fundamental goal of zero greenhouse gas emissions globally is through much, much better technology, and the only way to get there is through, good, I'm on my last slide, and I now have a better clicker, is through real innovation. Okay, and there we go. So, in summary, it's time to get the logic chain right, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So with that, I want to introduce my colleague and friend Michael Shellenberger, who will kick us off with other opening remarks. I would also add on each of the tables are question cards. So during the panels, we'll have opportunity for questions. If you'd like to just write down a question you have, hold it up, folks will bring it around and bring it up to the speakers. So Michael Shellenberger is president and co-founder of the Breakthrough Institute, which is headquartered in California. He's the author of a number of books, including Breakthrough and a most recent one, another recent one, Love Your Monsters, about the importance of technological innovation. Michael and also his co-founder of Breakthrough, Ted Nordhaus, who we'll also hear from today, were named Time Magazine's Heroes of the Environment in 2008. Michael also co-founded the Apollo Alliance in 2002. And most importantly, Michael has been lauded by the great environmentalist Stephen Colbert last night. I'm sure you've all seen it. If you haven't seen it, go watch it on your TiVo or on Hulu, as a radical new kind of environmentalist. So Michael, directly from New York last night, please join me in welcoming Michael Shellenberger.
Thanks, Rob. Thank all of you, and I want to thank all of you for coming. And and congratulate Rob and the ITIF team for pulling together this third annual conference. I think it's very exciting to see a packed room and this movement grow over the last several years. And to paraphrase John Stuart Mill, give me one Rob Atkinson over 99 clean energy lobbyists. The following speech was written with my co-author and friend Ted Nordhaus, though all mistakes are his and his alone. About once a month, we at the Breakthrough Institute get an email or, as often, a carefully hand-typed letter from someone who politely, if sternly, informs us that they have invented the solution to all of the world's energy needs. This incredible technology, they explain, has none of the problems that plague other energy technologies. It's so cheap as to almost be free. It emits zero pollution. It's completely safe, and it's totally reliable. Unfortunately, they explain, the investors they've shown they're designed to just don't get it. They are riding in the hopes that we might get it, seen as how we are committed to paradigm shifts and all, and help them to secure modest upfront financing required to demonstrate this miracle for all the world to see. Is it too loud? Is that okay? It's easy to laugh, but of course there's something wonderful about the zeal of the entrepreneur. Wasn't Steve Jobs every bit the zealot for Apple products? And wasn't that part of what made him a revolutionary? But in the world of public policy and politics, such technology dogmatism can be toxic. It's one thing to believe that your technology will triumph in the market. It's quite another to believe that only your technology merits public support. And yet that's the attitude that has plagued energy policy for the last 40 years. Much of the left says that little to no innovation is required because existing solar and wind technologies can provide 100% of the world's electricity. Much of the right says there's no justification for government support of innovation beyond basic science because fossil fuels and nuclear energy are just fine as they are. The tell of the technology tribalist is his insistence that little to no innovation is needed for his technology to scale. Next slide, please. Many date technology tribalism back to when Reagan took Carter's solar panels off the White House, but the origins go back to 1976. Go ahead and advance. Does it work? Okay. This? Oh, this one. If nuclear power were clean, safe, economic, assured of ample fuel, and socially benign per se, it would still be unattractive because of the political implications of the kind of energy economy it would lock us into. This is written by Amory Lovins, the anti-nuclear activist in 1976 for Foreign Affairs. Decentralized solar, wind, and energy efficiency were more than enough, renewable advocates would go on to argue for the next 35 years, to meet all of the world's energy needs. By the late 1980s, environmentalists and progressives pointed to climate change as yet another reason to switch to renewables. The response from conservatives was mostly knee-jerk. If the climate science says we have to power civilization on rickety and expensive renewables, they effectively said, then I'm not buying your climate science. But as climate scientists and energy analysts did the math, the case for a renewables-only path to dealing with climate change became increasingly untenable. Energy consumption will double by mid-century and quadruple by the end of the century as the global poor become rich and the human population rises to 9 billion. The idea that all that new energy could come from renewables alone increasingly became viewed as ridiculous. One of the greatest dangers the world faces is the possibility that a vocal minority of anti-nuclear activists could prevent a phase-out of coal emissions. So said James Hansen, NASA climate scientist, and he wasn't alone. Over the last few years, a growing number of other green voices have emerged calling for more nuclear, including James Lovelock, the originator of the Gaia hypothesis, Whole Earth Catalog founder Stuart Brand, and the left-wing British newspaper columnist George Monbiot. And while polarization has unquestionably shrunk the moderate middle in the United States, there still remains a broad majority of Americans who reject technology tribalism and have come to embrace the innovation of all energy sources. Indeed, if you cut back cut past particular technologies and instead go to core values, you find a large percentage of Americans, and we would argue most humans, would want energy that is increasingly cheap, clean, reliable, and safe. And this is not an embrace of a particular thing, solar panels, nuclear reactors, fracking, wind farms, but rather a process of human development. It's an embrace of technological innovation, not of particular technologies as they happen to exist today. This posture is consonant with the development of the human species. Our history is the history of having moved from scarce, dirty, unreliable, and dangerous energy sources to increasingly abundant, cleaner, safer, and more reliable ones. Wood and charcoal fires were first replaced by coal-fired steam power and then by coal and oil-fired electricity. This transition saved millions of lives that would have been lost to respiratory diseases and allowed depleted forests to grow back. Fossil fuels allowed agriculture to become more efficient, sparing huge amounts of land. Instead of animals providing organic fertilizer, people used inputs like fertilizer derived from natural gas and tractors powered by fossil energy. Switching from steam to electricity to power factories saved even more lives, and coal electricity has become vastly cheaper, safer, and more efficient. At the same time, society started moving to electricity from hydroelectric dams, started moving to electricity from hydroelectric dams, natural gas, and nuclear energy, all of which are vastly cleaner than coal. Their environmental impacts can be significant, but all pale to the health and environmental impacts of coal mining and coal burning. Energy transitions depend to a large extent on a country's natural resources and its political culture. But what's universal is that the publics and growing economies keep demanding cheaper, cleaner, more reliable, and safer technologies. And so we would come to our argument, we need a broad innovation agenda that transcends today's technology tribalism, its technology fads, and our boom and bust approach to policymaking. We should be pushing hard on all of our energy technologies to make them cheaper, cleaner, safer, and more reliable. This is the opportunity for President Obama and the Congress over the next 4 years, and we believe the challenge to all of us over the next 40. Now the question turns to, how do we do this? The question that will be addressed by the panelists today. Is it by giving entrepreneurs grants as though the government were the Ford Foundation? Is it by only funding basic science out of a belief that innovation proceeds in a linear way from basic scientific discoveries to demonstration to commercialization? Should we copy the successes of the Department of Defense, which acts as a demanding customer of advanced technologies? We would suggest that the first step is to take a cold, hard look at the facts. With solar and wind, huge amounts of innovation, thanks to a 5-fold increase in public funding globally, have resulted in a 75% drop in the price of solar panels and a 25% drop in the price of wind turbines in the last 5 years. By any standard, this is a great success. At the same time, these technologies remain intermittent, and because we lack cheap utility-scale storage, all require expensive backup, mostly from natural gas. Nuclear energy provides baseload energy that is far cleaner than fossil energy and cheaper when the backup and storage costs are counted of renewables. But the light water designs nations are currently locked into can result in meltdowns, such as 3 Mile Island and Fukushima. While neither of those accidents proved to be a public health disaster, both were economic disasters for the industry and shook the public's confidence in nuclear power. Fracking shale provides cheap and abundant quantities of natural gas with half the carbon of coal and none of the toxic heavy metals. Gas is largely responsible for the fact that emissions are declining in the United States faster than in any other country in the world. Gas's impact on the landscape, while much protested, is minor compared to coal mining. Still, the industrialization of the countryside with heavy trucks and drill pads has provoked a backlash that threatens the expansion of natural gas and its ability to displace coal. Each of these technologies has progressed amidst great failures, both technological and political. Advanced breeder reactors demonstrating meltdown-proof technologies and fuel reprocessing were shut down amidst technological difficulties and misplaced fears of weapons proliferation. The demonstration of carbon capture and storage has proven to be more expensive and difficult than anticipated, resulting in impatience in Congress with the technology. And the poster child of government waste, the SynFuels program, in fact succeeded in delivering fuel for $60 a barrel. Its political black eye resulted when oil dropped to below $20 a barrel. The second move we need to make is to get beyond the linear model of innovation. The idea that today's world-changing technologies emerged in a linear progression from some basic scientific discovery to invention to commercialization is largely a myth. The innovation historian Benoit Godin says that this myth was invented by scientists, propagated by industrialists, and then formalized by neoclassical economists who are more concerned with mathematical purity than real-world accuracy. Consider, well, I skipped some slides. Consider the shale fracking revolution. While many have tried to characterize our abundance of shale gas as a kind of manna from heaven, in truth, it is the result of one of the most successful public-private partnerships in American history. After the OPEC embargo in the early 70s, the Energy Research and Development Agency, which later became the Department of Energy, began an aggressive program to explore whether it was possible to get natural gas out of shales. This wasn't basic research. It was mostly demonstration projects, with basic science being done in service of a very specific goal, figuring out how to get more gas out of the ground. In the past, private drillers like T. Boone Pickens had drilled right past the shale to the limestone beneath. Everyone knew there was gas in the shale, but they didn't know how much or how to get it out. Over the next 35 years, DOE worked with the Gas Research Institute, itself a creation of a tax on pipeline shipments overseen by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to fund fracking demonstrations, including the first massive hydraulic fracturing, drill bit development, and they even financed George Mitchell's first horizontal well. And rather than coming at the end of the process, the federal government subsidized unconventional gas exploration starting in 1980, about 20 years before shale fracking had been successfully commercialized. What all of this suggests is that we just need a more open-minded approach to innovation. We need to discern between unproductive waste and productive waste, between productive failure and unproductive failure. We need to understand the state's role as supporting innovation broadly and not simply as basic science. So in service of today's conversation and my mandate by Rob to stimulate conversation, we would propose the following guidelines for an innovation agenda. So our immodest proposal: first, embrace the innovation of all energy technologies. In an effort as large as the one of quadrupling global energy consumption by 2100 and getting most, if not all, of that energy from zero carbon energy sources, there's no room for dogmatism. The technology tribalists have created a negative-sum game. They've weakened the ability of Republicans and Democrats to work together. Innovation advocates must appeal to reasonable conservatives and reasonable liberals with an all-of-the-above agenda that is focused on making all energy technologies cheaper, cleaner, more reliable, and safer. Number two, focus on solving problems. Innovation is always about solving problems in the real world, not about proceeding in a linear way from basic science to commercialization. Where the technology tribalist waves away the problems with his preferred energy source and exaggerates the problems of other technologies, the energy innovationist must take a cold, hard look at the challenges each technology faces so that appropriate policy measures can be implemented. This requires acknowledging all energy technologies are subsidized in one way or another, often with the aim of increasing their production, not accelerating innovation. We should ask whether there would be a way to rearrange these subsidies to support innovation, aka problem solving, rather than production. Number three, embrace a wider set of solutions beyond basic science, just what the right says, and deploy, 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 which is is what the left says. Both of these are wrong in applying a one-size-fits-all approach to technologies that are in wildly varying stages of development, each with very unique problems. No serious innovation scholar believes we got microchips through the government providing just basic science, nor do fracking pioneers believe that the shale gas production credit was the most important policy support available to them. Microchips required aggressive government contracting from private firms for microchips over multiple generations and iterations, and 20 years separated the first massive hydraulic shale fracture from Mitchell Energy's commercial breakthrough in West Texas. Number 4, accelerate the failure rate. All technology success stories are preceded by decades of failure. The key is to have a high rate of trial and error. This may require changing how we do subsidies. Did we really need to pay for Solyndra to build an entire factory? Could we instead have used the money to pay private firms to demonstrate smaller batches of advanced solar panels that were then used, and then the feedback coming back to the firms and having that cycle repeated? This procurement model is how we got advanced jet turbines and microchips. There's a direct relationship in those cases between the producer and the user, and the speed of innovation quickens at lower costs. When it comes to energy, the relationship between producers and users today is mediated by a thicket of regulations and subsidies. The billions spent in the stimulus had the goal of creating jobs in the short term, not driving innovation over the long term. If we're going to embrace failure as the key to success, we can acknowledge that not all failures are created equal. Number 5, increased knowledge spillover. Shales were just one of the unconventional gas resources supported by federal policy, and the public-private research collaboration was evaluated and updated annually by FERC to respect dynamic industry priorities. Mitchell's top geologist told us that the real progress came after Mitchell invited in DOE and GRI, shared its research, and invited in other explorers. I just finished reading this very obscure text about that period, and what we learned is that Mitchell actually helped organize a day of presentations on shale fracking at a local library where they invited in other explorers. DOE sent over advanced underground mapping technologies from Sandia National Labs, as well as a team of crack programmers, many of whom now work for private companies in the area, including Halliburton. We should seek to increase, not decrease, knowledge spillover when it comes to promising clean energy innovations that are promising, but still a long way off from being ready to scale up to displace fossil fuels. Finally, we should reform energy subsidies. We need to subsidize innovation, not production. Innovation policy should look more like DoD procurement than agricultural crop subsidies. The American Wind Energy Association should be applauded for proposing a phase down of wind's production tax credit. This is an unusually mature response from an industry association. Now it's incumbent on all of us to consider how to continue innovation of wind technologies even as production subsidies are phased out. Similarly, we should consider direct procurement of advanced technologies, not just demonstration, since, as I noted before, it is this procurement process that increases the rate of trial and error and allowed for the development of such things as cheap microchips and jet turbines. We should pursue all of this while recognizing that we live in a pluralistic society where people have different values and different visions of the good society. This means we won't get everything we want, and we will have to compromise. In the world of energy, our values come into conflict, or at least appear to come into conflict, since whether a technology is safe and clean is often highly subjective. We may like to imagine 100% renewables or a 100% nuclear future, but pinning technologies against each other undercuts innovation across the board. The question at hand is not which technologies need innovation, they all do. The question is how to attack each technology's idiosyncratic innovation needs. And that's what we're here to discuss today. Thank you very much. I'd like to, before I introduce the next panel, I would just like to say we made a big effort to get people who were going to get up here and take a cold, hard look at the facts. That weren't going to get up here and just kind of blow a lot of hot air and smoke about how great their technologies are. And in that sense, we hope it would be a contrast to other clean energy conferences. And so with that, I'd like to introduce a very good reporter who is taking a cold, hard look at these technologies, Kevin Bullis from the MIT Technology Review. Kevin, please come on up and you can introduce the rest of the panel. Please join me in welcoming Kevin.